Cool. I just heard about this new band called Cinder Road. So I need to go check out their music and get a vibe for their sound. All right, let me go check out YouTube and see what I hear. Wait, what? What is this? Okay, I'm not really vibing with this post-grunge sound. It might be okay for somebody. It might be okay for some, but this is not what this podcast is about. Dude, I thought this guy had shared with me about his band, Cinder Road. Wait a second. I gotta get rid of this music here. Wait a second. This just not sound right. Hold on. Let me check this out again. Oh man, not Cinder Road. It's the Cinder Highway. Okay, let me check this out. Let me try to search up the Cinder Highway on YouTube, not Cinder Road. Cinder Highway. All right. Maybe this is cool. Yeah. Well, greetings, fellow Earth babies, and welcome to Post-Punk Heartstrings. I am Jimmy James S. Butler, and I am still relearning how to talk. I am hopefully sounding a little more clear and a lot less slurry. I'm still kind of stuttering a little bit now and then, especially when I get tired or amped up, which I am trying my best not to do. And the intro you heard is a simulation of what actually pretty much happened. I heard about the Cinder Highway from Todd Pennington, and I was in the middle of a whole bunch of stuff with work and everything else, and I didn't jump on YouTube, but I did jump onto Spotify, and I thought, I need to make sure I listen to this band. So on my drive to work, I quickly tried to search up the band on Spotify and typed in Cinder, and the Cinder Road came up, and I started listening to it, and I was like, there is no way that this is the right band. There were some brief moments when I really was thinking that this was Todd's band, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to communicate it back to Todd that really this post-grunge sound is not really anything close to what I enjoy. So, in fact, I kind of have some rather strong opinions about this genre and this period in the 90s when my beloved post punk and alternative new wave sound was being usurped by the grunge and post grunge acts. So I quickly looked back at the message I had from Todd and saw the name of the band to be Cinder Highway, found my way there, and the rest is the beautiful listening history that I was subjected to. And when I get to my chat with Todd, we will talk a little bit about the style of music. It is a very dreamy California shoegaze type sound, and I really feel like you're going to drift and soar on the sound along with me. When I was first planning to do this intro, it seemed like I had a whole bunch of announcements or different things I wanted to mention, and they're kind of leaving my head right now. So I do want to mention that, to my surprise, there is a Palm Ghost concert coming up in Kansas City on September the 6th. I could not believe it when I had this notification from Spotify, which I rarely get. Maybe I don't follow that many bands on there, but I had this notification, looked at my phone and saw that it was from Spotify for the band The Palm Ghosts. And I just briefly glanced at it and saw, oh, they're playing live. And I thought, well, maybe it's some sort of live concert or something like that. And why am I getting this notification? But then when I looked closer, they're actually coming to Kansas City, and that's why I'm follow them, and that's why I was receiving the notification. And they're coming on September 6th, which is my birthday week. It's 2 days after my birthday. And I instantly reached out to Ben Douglas and texted him to express my enthusiasm and how excited I am that they are coming to town. I know they were trying for a long time to get to Kansas City and maybe further west. And I hope my prodding of Steve Tulipana, who is part owner of the Record Bar, I hope that me tagging him and the Palm Ghost and kind of trying to get them to the venue was at least a small part of them reaching out and finalizing a date. They are not going to be playing at the Record Bar, but they are going to be playing at the Mini Bar, which is part of the Record Bar. I think the Record Bar seats maybe 300 people, and the Mini Bar seats about 100. The capacity is around 100. They won't necessarily be seated, but I was really excited because I've never been to the Mini Bar, and I told Ben I was really looking forward to that and being a little more intimate, and I'll get to hang out with them and be up close and really enjoy their music live. I'm a huge fan. I did a podcast episode with Ben and Joe, the two main guys in the band. They also have Walt Epting on drums. And if you haven't gone back to listen to that episode, you should do that. Really great guys, really awesome post-punk, alternative, new wave sound. And I can't say enough about the Palm Ghost, and they just keep churning out music. It's really amazing. So that's the one thing I definitely wanted to be sure to mention, and I'll be posting on social media to try to bring more people to the concert. I already bought my tickets. I think the tickets were maybe $13, maybe $14, and you just can't beat that. 2 tickets for $28. So I didn't think I was going to get to see them this year unless I was going to figure out a way to get down to Nashville or maybe one of their other concerts, but so excited that they're coming to KC, and I will maybe check out the rest of their schedule and see maybe some other towns in the general area that they're going to be coming to. So with that, I will try to wrap this up. I really, really think you're going to enjoy the conversation I had with Todd Pennington of the Cinder Highway. I tend to edit the conversations a lot to try to make them smooth and to make everyone sound their best. Since my stroke, I have kind of tried to do less editing and try to keep the conversations a little more raw and in their natural form. And listening back during the editing process, I really, really felt good about this conversation. And I guess all that's left to say is here we go.
Hey, Jimmy James, let me see if I can get this camera working. Yeah, there we go.
Hey, Todd, how are you?
Doing good, thanks.
Nice to see you.
Likewise, yeah.
And kind of meet you, you know. So.
Yeah, you know how it is. It's in this world of musos these days. We get to know people online and we haven't met in person, and they become, closer friends and some folks we grew up with, it seems.
That's exactly right. Yeah, for sure. I've made a quite a few friends in the past few years just doing this podcast,
Yeah.
and it's been a it's been really cool, really cool, including yourself. So
Yeah. Same.
yeah.
I
So
got turned on, because I was friends with Mark.
okay.
And so when you had Mark on for the episodes on Sam Phillips,
Yeah.
um, that's what, I kind of found you through Mark and found the podcast through Mark. And I knew of Sam from growing up, but I never really had followed her stuff. Those are great episodes. They were just such a great
Those
introduction to
those
who I
are
really.
those are at least one of those is like the top episode ever as far as listenership.
Yeah,
So yeah, everybody loved those episodes.
they were
But
great. And Mark's got a
they
great knack for unpacking it, and you've got a great
oh
process
man, that's for
for formatting
sure.
the show. Yeah,
We spent a lot of time in unpacking those episodes. But there was a lot of material to cover.
yeah,
When I was talking to Mark, well, I guess it was when we were recording with Jim Anderson the other day. I was like, yeah, you remember the Cinder Highway, you know them, right? And Mark's like been a fan forever. I forgot how long he's been a fan. Like he goes way back, I
it
think, for
goes
you
way
guys.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I need to reach back out to him and be like, hey, sorry. I kind of act like you just now heard of the Cinder Highway, but
well, it's not a
you
lot of folks, but Mark's one of them.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see if we can get more. I hope. Thanks a lot for coming on. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, happy to do it, and thanks for the opportunity. Love the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a wonderful thing. We've had a lot of fun. Like I said, I've met a lot of people that I never would have met in, opened up all sorts of doors for me just to get to know people. So yeah, it's been great. So I'm really excited about this. I have a feeling we have some musical history that we can talk about a little bit, like your growing up years maybe, but different artists, and things like that. I guess I need to find out, first whether you had the same kind of upbringing that I did. I was pretty much in the Christian culture, pretty much surrounded in that. And so I came out of that sort of the alternative music end of that is kind of what I gravitated towards, maybe not in the beginning because I wasn't exposed to that many groups, there weren't that many. And then it kind of took off. And so I think I have a bunch of questions. I usually do an intro, but I'll go ahead and say I'm talking with Todd Pennington
That's
and
it.
from the Cinder Highway. So on your Bandcamp page, it says the Cinder Highway has been making friends and enemies and musical sounds since 2016. So hopefully you've been making more friends than enemies.
I like to think so, but kind of the origin story of the band and Enemies is a little tongue in cheek, obviously.
Oh,
But
I'm gonna love this.
yeah, I did grow up in church. I still, I've kind of changed the church community I'm in, but I still am active in my faith. And a lot of the places that we've lived, I'll play on the worship team. And
Hmm.
so the Cinder Highway was sort of music I made away from church. And you know how church communities can be, a lot of folks find that a little scary. I don't know why that's seen as scary, but it's seen as a
Yeah.
little bit, even though our music is quite tame and very safe, I don't think there's a lot of
Hmm.
scariness in there. I can see in people's eyes that they're a little unsettled by that for some reason. And so uh,
Yeah.
that's why I framed our tagline that way, because I don't know why that seems to make people. It's that old fashioned, there's this just a bristling in some church circles about music that's not, overtly about a matter of faith. It's not explicitly worship music, or it's about some explicitly Christian
Yep.
theme, which I like a lot of that music. There's a lot of it that's not that great. There's a lot of it that's great. It's like every genre or category of music. It's just not mine. I'm a Christian, and
Yeah.
so some of that comes through in some of the songs, and in others, it's just a love song, or it's just it's a thought about something else. just what's on my heart at the time.
Yeah, there was a lot of that coming out of the church as far as like music needs to be a tool. It's for worship or it's evangelism. And when I talked to Chris Taylor about it, he was like, he didn't. I don't want to be my music to be used as a tool. I just want it to be what it is, especially outside of the context of just like doing it as a worship team, as opposed to just like making music, creating art or expressing yourself, right? So there is a lot of uneasiness, and I think some of it is because of there's the mindset that you have to be doing it for this reason, and if you're doing it for another reason, then that's substandard. You know what I mean? Like for the cause, but
Yeah, and I have come to really disfavor even the taxonomy that, well, this is Christian music and this is
yeah,
some other kind of music. Well, okay, I mean, I, you know, I'm drinking coffee. Is this Christian coffee?
yeah, sure,
When I'm writing with a pen, is it a Christian pen? I could go get one from a store that says, a Bible verse on it, but it doesn't have to. I think that's a false dichotomy that
yeah,
even in scripture we see, Paul, I think it was Paul, was a tent maker. Peter was a fisherman. These guys had jobs,
yeah,
they weren't
right,
Christian jobs. They were swinging a hammer, pulling a net, doing work to make a living. And to some extent, there was creative works in that time, just like ours. And God's a God of order and beauty, and there can be meaning and significance in music that's written by people who aren't necessarily Christians,
yeah,
who don't share
yeah,
the same faith I do, but they might be noticing something about the world that reflects God's design for the world, or they might be just pondering some question of morality or life that has resonance. Could be right out of a Bible story, many of which are pretty sporty, especially in the Old Testament.
yeah. That's for sure.
And so I used to work at a Christian bookstore. It's when I was in high school. It's where I got first exposed to a lot of the bands I ended up listening to, because I was stocking the shelves and I was getting the demos from the distributors. So I had a great supply of stuff. And I
Yeah,
should
the
have learned the
connection.
lesson. Yeah, I should have learned the lesson back then that, a lot of the best music was because it wasn't always explicitly about faith-based themes, was kind of viewed with a little bit of skepticism. And then people who aren't, immersed in a church culture kind of look at it a little skeptically because, well, I don't know, it's, you know, Christian
Yeah,
rock, it's not making God better, it's making rock and roll worse. That's a school of thought that sometimes is true.
yeah. You can. I mean, the church I go to, they do, even movie series and stuff like that. I mean, you can find lessons about life, like in anything. What even even though its intent might be something different. So I just think that it always goes back to that, worried about being separate from the world, and really my personal beliefs are that you should be involved in it. There's commonality in humankind.
There's a lot of Francis Schaeffer wrote about this, and I haven't read a lot of Francis Schaeffer, but enough to know that a lot of God's design for the world that He made is manifested in when beautiful things are created. So it doesn't matter what's on someone's mind. If it's a beautiful thing, it's actually reflecting that creator's vision. Ultimately, the person who's doing it may not share that belief. That might not be their intent, but uh, I can see that in the creation that's been made. So anyhow,
Yeah.
so our stuff is Cinder Highway. I mean, it's not, overtly faith based. I mean, there are some ideas that are certainly rooted in my faith, but I don't think they're going to be spinning our stuff on Caleb anytime soon.
That's probably a good thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
uh, you know, Speaking about the band, it's kind of, at least it seems this way to me. It's kind of nebulous who is in the band, who
Mhm.
the Cinder Highway is. I'm not sure if that's intentional or if that's just just happens to be the way it is. But maybe you can tell me about how the band got started, and you know, are you the key person behind the Cinder Highway? Do you try to bring in different people to perform the different instrumental roles?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and it sort of evolved backwards from the way I think it does for a lot of bands. It is a little bit intentional. We don't credit members of the band by name, partly because when I was growing up, I was always fascinated by these bands that you're not quite sure who they are, where they
Yeah,
come from, what's
yeah.
their deal, and sometimes even if they were credited, you don't really know who they are. The Swoon was like that.
Oh
They had their
yeah,
names in there. But who are these guys? Turns out
right,
they're a bunch of, children from Minnesota. Uh,
right.
Revolutionary Army of the Infant Jesus. Their latest releases have some credits, but who are these guys? They're a bunch of professors from Manchester. And I always thought that helped the music speak for itself, basically.
Yeah,
Um, and so that's sort of the ethos we've tried to bring to it. We do have some folks that we credit if they're coming in as a session player. And the way it's evolved is really I'm kind of the one member of the band that's been consistent the whole time across all the projects. So in some ways, it's just really a stage name. I'd love for it to be a band. The nature of my 9 to 5 has had me move every few years for a long time, which makes it very hard to keep a band together unless you have people who are just independently able to do their own recording and then share tracks remotely. So it's been a little bit of a pickup game of people I've worked with remotely and people I was able to bring into the recording place I set up, wherever I live, to get those captures. Starting next month, I'm gonna try to see if I can get a lineup together for the next project, because I think that when we get other contributors on the records, they bring a real spark to that, and that really brings a lot of it alive. When I am playing multiple parts, I can hear it's me because I play them the same way because I'm me. I don't know if other people hear it as much as I do, but when other contributors are in, it just really, brings those tracks to life, and sometimes drives their evolution. Sometimes someone else will come in, lay down a track, and I'll go back and change the song to fit what they've recorded.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we kind of get some mutual creative energy working like that.
You were talking about that, and you were talking about recording as a band, and then there's file sharing, and there's you're kind of done some of both. It sounds like, and that sounds like what most bands are doing these, especially in the past several years, right?
Yeah, if you can find like-minded people at all who kind of have the same vision for your music, finding them in your town is doubly hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm you're talking about that, so I'm thinking about the Corona Del Mar.
Hmm.
That was one of the CDs in 2021, and I think you were supposed to do a live concert during COVID. I don't know if that's what the live tracks are from. Was that from your live stream that you were doing in lieu of the live concert during
No,
COVID?
so the
That was
very
different.
first thing in my life, the very first thing in my life that got canceled in the Corona pandemic was a music night in Lompoc, California, that we were going to be performing at. We were going to be my daughter and I were going to be performing "Good Reasons." It was going to be a debut of a new song. First new thing we were going to be shared with the world since the Castaway EP had come out as our first release of original stuff. And that day it got canceled, and that was the beginning of everything that just went crazy after.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, in addition to work being crazy, you couldn't go out, you couldn't do anything. So I was kind of trapped in the house, and I really wanted to put some stuff out quickly to follow up on the Castaway, the first EP we had done. I wanted to,
Hmm.
we had got a little bit of traction and some folks following the band, and I wanted to keep that momentum going. And so I wanted to put something out. So I took a couple of songs that we had in a basically a early form, Starlight Again and Baghdad in Winter. And then I did some live tracks. That summer I did a social media tour where I worked up a set, just me solo live, and I broadcasted it on different social media platforms. So like this week we're going to be live on Instagram. This week we're going to be live on Facebook. This week we're going to be live on Telegram. And we just recorded them all and picked the best cuts. And that's what is the live EP off of there. We didn't do any digital distribution on those. They're a little rougher. It's not a full band thing, so we just kept them on the CD. But
nice addition, I think.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Did a Simon and Garfunkel cover. That was fun.
Yeah, I heard that. Song. Yeah.
Always learning about trying to pay for the rights to use these songs. I think we paid 100 times the royalties just to the royalty management company. So the admin of paying for the copyright is tons more than what Paul Simon's actually getting for our recordings. So coming and going, they kind of make it hard as a musician trying to do the right thing by the songwriters.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like you did you did your best to do the right thing though.
Yeah, we've tried to, we've released a few. I say we've released a few covers. We have recorded a few covers, but we've let the producers of those projects handle the distribution because we don't own the rights to the songs. So, and working out all the details of that's just been too hard to do. So
tell me about the covers you've done. I know some of them.
So the first thing we released was a cover of a song by the Choir called "Flap Your Wings." It was part of a tribute album that called Pants on Fire. It was the very first thing I'd ever recorded. So very trial and error, lots of, bedroom recording folks on the project, some great stuff on there. A group called the Chestertons, Kevin and Brian Bianchi from Vanishing Shores. Their earlier project was called the Chestertons, and they had a track on there. They did a cover of a song called To Rescue Me that is just fantastic.
Love that song.
Yeah, great song, and their take on it, it's better than the Choir's. The Choir's is great, but they do a really great take on it. If you haven't heard it, it's worth digging out.
I haven't heard it. Yeah, I haven't heard that release yet.
So we recorded that for that, and then sometime later, someone from the Starflyer 59 tribe was putting together a tribute album for Starflyer 59, and we did a cut for that. We covered Smoke off of the Young in My Head album. Brian Bianchi from Vanishing Shores actually mixed that track and did the mixing for us. Love that song. Recently, the Choir did a Kickstarter to reissue Free Flying Soul, and they put out a call for fans to do vocals on some of the tracks. I did a vocal take for Leprechaun, a song called Leprechaun. And then a while back, it would have been the summer of 2019 because we were in the process of moving when I did this. So I did this sitting in a hotel room on headphones, but we did a remix of a song called The Time Has Come off of the Choir's Bloodshot album, and the Choir released that through their own channels. Yeah.
Nice.
So that's
choir. It's choir heavy.
It's choir heavy.
That's cool. That's all right.
I'm a huge fan. And Starflyer, the Choir and Starflyer are a couple of bands that are have been real influential for me and that make great music.
Yeah, I was pretty sure you had done a Starflyer 59 track, but I couldn't remember which one. So it was Smoke.
Smoke. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we wanted to do ours a little more upbeat, but I was having trouble getting the click track synced for the drummer. So I actually just took Jason's track, the Starflyer track, and just shrank it. So it was a little pitch shifted, but it didn't matter for the drums. So he just recorded the drums to a compressed version of the actual song from the record as the guide track. And then I just went back and laid down the rest of the tracks on top of that. And Brian did a little bit of production in the mix.
Cool. Cool. So how did you get into playing music? Like what's your history with that?
So I wanted to play music when I was younger. I got a beater guitar in high school, tried to teach myself to play just out of the chord chart in the back of a songbook that had the little dots on the tabs.
Mm-hmm.
I never did learn properly, so I taught myself a lot of bad habits in school. And then once I got, I graduated, I started a job, was moving with work, having kids. I really didn't play for years and years until maybe the mid 2010s when I'd made a professional pivot out of one part of the company into another part of the company and had a little more time on my hands. And the worship leader from our church was going to be leading an event over at our house, kind of a house concert kind of thing. He was over there checking the place out while I was at work and saw my guitar and said, "Hey, whose guitar is that?" My wife said, "That's Todd's. He plays guitar." He's like, "We got to get him on the praise team." She's like, "Oh, he'd love that. He'd be happy to play on the praise team." And so they started scheduling me for the praise team. And I didn't know what I was doing and I sounded horrible, but the School of Rock is a great university, and playing live in front of people every week is very motivating to get better. And so I, worked at it and, got my game a little more squared away in the course of a few years. And then, fast forward a few years with moves again, we were kind of between churches. I wasn't on a team because of where we found ourselves. And so started playing church music first, using the Cinder Highway name in some venues around DC, and then started working other stuff into the set at different coffee houses and stuff. And
Wow.
we got a crazy mixed up set. We'd have, Waylon Jennings, the Smashing Pumpkins, Jesus Culture, and Pink Floyd. And then we play, a traditional gospel song or something, followed by something that, it was all mixed up. And when, work moved me again, couldn't take the band with me. So I found myself alone, but I had started playing, and that I finally said, "Hey," it was actually when Brian put out that call for songs for the choir tribute album. I took a stab at it and then thought, I think I can do this. I think I'm going to start trying to record my own stuff. And one thing led to another, and here we are.
That's such a cool story. Like, it may not seem that significant to you. Maybe it does. Like how you kind of like weren't that great of a musician at the beginning, had some bad habits, kind of just, learned it, but then kind of left it and then kind of got back into it. And, you just kind of, you did the hard work,
I was
on the back end, which a lot of people do at the beginning, when they've got when they're teenagers and they've got almost 24 hours a day on their hands to do nothing with.
Well, I was very insecure about that for a long time because everybody else that I was playing with was so much better, just more proficient as a musician, because they'd all played in, many of them in touring bands in high school and college, or those ages. Anyhow, it just started to dawn on me, look, I can't go back. That wasn't my story when I was that age. I can't go back and make it my story. I can do this now from where I'm at, or I can just let it go and just not do that, even though I'm passionate about it and, feel desire to do it. So now that the complicating factors of that, a lot of the stuff we listen to, there's very little that I listen to that are artists I didn't find in high school and college. They were the soundtrack of my youth, and they're either still making music or I'm spinning their old stuff, or both. Or, they've changed, projects they're in, but it's people who had a fan base from when they were young and could afford to not have any money and live like a hobo running around making rock and roll. So that's hard to break into a music community where it's already a small kind of it's a small community of people who like the kind of stuff that we like, this post-punk sound.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of nostalgia attached to it.
Oh yeah, for
it's
sure.
It's hard to cut through, not in a bad way. There's no malice in it. It's just people got so much time in the day to have music in their life, and new guys off the street. It's hard to find space for that in people's lives. So when I do, like when you found us and reached out, it was really heartwarming because something was out there in the wild, and got discovered. So that's the sort of thing that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, I think people our age, there's a lot of bands that like are drawn towards the nostalgia of the new wave and post punk and the 80s, and now they're on the back end, and they're older, and then so a lot of them have children who are older, or they have established jobs, right? They have income, so they're kind of doing like what you're doing a little bit on the back end, and I think it's pretty cool. I've met the Palm Ghost guys; they're out doing it, and Jim Anderson of Airedale is doing it. There's a lot of people that are doing kind of what you do, and it's so exciting and awesome for us, right? I don't love just doing episodes with, I'm going to do an episode on The Cure, or I'm going to do, these band, like I like to do those sometimes. Although with The Cure, it's kind of hard for me to choose what I'm going to do
Yeah,
if there's so much there, or the Smiths. That's why I haven't done some of those. I'm like, what am I going to do? Pornography, or am I going to do disintegration?
you could
Completely different.
pick 1 year and like pick
Like,
3 albums from that year.
exactly.
Any 1 year from those days, you're gonna have a lot of material of great sounds.
Yeah. But I love finding, I'll call them new bands,
Mhm.
um, that a lot of people don't know about, and hopefully I can get more people to know about them. And I just love talking to people and finding out their story, and what they're passionate about and what's their inspiration. So I think it's awesome that I get to meet a lot of people who are pursuing their passion on the back end of things, sort of. They've kind of focused on work and raising their families and different, like, not that there's they're still maintaining those relationships, right? But they're got a little more time and maybe capital, really, like to to pursue those things. And I think that excites me.
It's a great time to be making music because the barriers to entry are just gone because you
Yeah,
can do so much in a computer that we all have, or even just an iPhone. You can make pretty
yeah,
decent recordings. I did a fan club release. I'll put stuff out every now and then to the fan club, but I literally recorded on an iPhone on an airplane.
yeah,
The whole song was done on a portable device. Now it cuts both ways because the whole world has those options, and so you go to get
yeah.
it distributed. There's a lot of competition, but when you do it because you find meaning and value in the process of making the art, well, then it's worth it. You know,
Absolutely, it's worth it, for that reason, I think. All the technology, like you said, now everybody has access to it. So, you know, there's a myriad of different bands or musical projects, right? So you're like a speck, right? But that's what it's all about, is the passion in the creativity and getting to share that. Obviously, you want to share that with people too, but I think art for art's sake, at the beginning, I think is kind of what it's for, and what the direction it should be.
that's why we do. That's why we press CDs.
Yeah,
Even though a lot of people don't even have a CD player anymore, unless they're a
yeah,
real muso. But there's something about just the physicality
mm-hmm,
of having a recording with cover art that you can hold in your hands and,
yeah,
a liner note you can open up
yeah,
and read. And there's something about that, makes that more. And I think some of what is, especially with vinyl, we haven't pressed vinyl because it's just too expensive. But
yeah,
that's why I like getting vinyl. Even though I've got a thing on CD, I might pick it up on vinyl because you put it on the turntable and you sit there and listen to it, and you're experiencing that whole album
yeah,
and not just letting the shuffle happen, randomly on your phone or at Spotify picking an algorithm. It's a way of, pulling you out of the bustle and letting you connect with that creative work for the time, for that time, the art, the sounds, the whole thing.
mm-hmm,
That's kind of a lost experience. That's kind of a shame. There's very few people that take the time, me included. I mean, I'm not, you
Yeah.
know, casting stones out of this glass house. I'm spinning my shuffle on my commute the same as everybody else. But it's a bit of a lost pastime to put a record on and just listen to the whole album.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're more engaged, that way. I think probably it's kind of sad that some younger people really didn't get to experience some, sitting there with an album, in your bedroom, listening to
Mhm.
an album and looking at the sleeve and reading the notes and stuff. So yeah.
And we had to really make some choices about that with the songs from the Fountain Gate album because it's got a lot of crossfades on there where one
Mm-hmm.
song leads into another, and some of those
Yeah.
make for rough cuts on
Yeah.
Spotify if you're just shuffling and one of the songs comes on.
Mm-hmm.
It might end in a way that sounds like a mistake or start. They tend to start kind of in the right place, but before we kind of settle on the tracks and settle on all these crossfades in the final design for the album, I reached out to Chris, who was going to be doing the mastering, and said, "Hey, anything I need to keep in mind? Like, is this a problem to do it this way? How do I need to get you the mixes? What am I totally shooting myself in the foot? Because it's going to screw up digital distribution." And he said, "Hey, man, if that's the way the songs are, then do them that way. And if people don't listen to the whole album all the way through, then they're the ones missing out on the way you made the record." And
Yeah.
so we did it that way. We did some single mixes of a few cuts,
Yeah.
so you can get those, without the crossfades. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the way the record is. So
Yeah, and I want to talk about that more. I love that you guys made that decision, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit further down. But
sure.
yeah, I'm glad that you did that. So you talked about relocating a couple
Mhm.
times for job, and so I did a lot of reading to try to be prepared because I always do. But so you were in California at one point, and then you went to Colorado, and then now you're in Virginia, which I assume basically it's Alexandria, but it's basically
Suburban
just
DC.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
DC, right?
I actually
Um,
work in DC.
gotcha. Hence the commute. Yeah,
Yeah.
when you're not working from home. But so and you talked a little bit about this, but like so, how did it change? Like as far as like after you relocated, to Colorado and then to Alexandria, like as far as like your recording of music and sharing, to kind of change to where you're doing more, sharing files and things like that, or
So that's been about the same all throughout, just because that's who the contributors have been. Kind of a mix of stuff we capture live at the house and stuff that other folks do remotely.
hmm
Um, all that really changes is with every project, I get a little better at figuring out my own workflow. So, like how to organize, you know, the cables, how to put the rack together of my offboard kit, and all that kind of stuff, and where in the house might be an opportune spot to get a little bit of quiet away from the utility room and the sounds of the
yeah,
household.
yeah,
Our the first songs came very slow, and then over time, I can record them now as fast as I can write them, and
Hmm.
so just the creative process of writing them is the pacing factor and the time to put towards that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, a lot of people struggle with like we'll call it production or whatever, of putting the songs together. But
Yeah, I discovered, much to my delight, when I started in on recording, that while I'm basically a C plus guitar player, I'll credit myself as an A minus producer. I feel like I've got a knack in the studio and for taking stuff and making something out of it.
hmm I love that.
And of course, in this, my daughter's helping the studio from time to time, and my youngest one, who's very observational, has reminded me from time to time, you only have to be good one measure at a time,
There you go.
which is true until you get up in front of people. But she's right, so there's a lot of latitude for different approaches in the studio.
Yeah, I think your model of the, would you call it a C, the guitar player, but being able to kind of create something out of, what you bring, right? That's a good model to exemplify. I feel like U2, very early U2 were very much creative in that sense. They weren't the great musicians, you know,
Right.
and they took things and were creative with them, right? The way they played, what they brought was unique, you know, in spite of what many would consider average or below average, musicianship. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and what I started to notice when I started thinking more critically about the music that I grew up listening to music just at face value. I was just enjoying the songs. But then as I started to perform, other people's songs at first, and then to write my own stuff later, I was listening to music in a different way, and realizing that a lot of what I'm listening to, I never really did. I still don't really listen to Van Halen and any of the really fast shredding. I don't begrudge people who enjoy that, and I admire the technical proficiency of
Hmm.
it. But I get bored on a really long wanking guitar solo very quickly. The stuff I really like, it's breathtakingly simple.
Hmm.
Pink Floyd songs. I mean, a couple of chord progressions with a lot of space in the mix. Jesus and Mary Chain. I mean, three chords played with passion.
Hmm.
Joy Division. I mean, literally, it might be one bass pattern that's the whole song.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. But and a lot of U2 is that way. Adam's playing one bass, or the
Hmm.
bass might not even change from verse to chorus, but they nest those parts creatively and makes it more than the sum of its parts. And I think that that's part of what's common to a lot of the music that I like. That's what the choir has in common with the Cure. They're
Hmm.
creatively layering these relatively straightforward parts. And Pink Floyd and Jesus and Mary Chain, they're creating an interesting sound, but it's very straightforward progressions a lot of the time. I mean, Pink Floyd has their moments where they'll get jazzy, but David Gilmour is a very different guitar player than Eddie Van Halen. He's all about the sound and the feel, and
Hmm.
he's got moments he'll speed it up, but he didn't make his bones playing a lot of notes real fast. He made his bones with well placed notes and well placed pauses, and
Yeah.
so I think that's the common thread in a lot of what I. And so I struggle to do that because it's easy to make the songs too crowded, and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always
For
trying
sure.
to simplify them, and the next record I'm already trying to make it simpler than things we've done because when you're early in recording, and you can hear this in a lot of early artists' early work, there's just a lot in there. There's a lot happening. And then as they mature and, learn their craft, it gets more and more confident in the
Hmm.
bits that are there and the placement of what's there. And Pink Floyd really is who just kind of typifies that for me.
Hmm.
Music is so patient with how it unfolds, and the space it leaves in the
Hmm.
music is what makes it so intoxicating and pulls you in.
Yeah, I agree. This might be a good segue. It's for another question. Um, so, do you remember the first album you bought with your own money? And there's no
That
judgment
was,
here. Okay.
yeah, it was. It was a record called Altered by a group called 2020.
Yeah, I
They
remember it.
Remember 2020?
Uh-huh.
I
Yep.
was a cassette, and I bought both of their tapes, but the first one wasn't, I didn't enjoy as much, but Altered I enjoyed a lot. And I don't know who all was in the band except for Roscoe Meeks. He was the guitar player who session guy. He was in a lot of bands. I'd see him from time to time because he had this distinctive Strat that had a Papa Smurf
Hmm.
sticker, and he scribbled all over his guitar. So when I'd go to a show, I'd be like, "Yeah, it's Roscoe Meek. It's the guy from 2020." So that was the first album I bought with my own money. Yeah, bought it at a New Year's Eve show.
I think there were two 2020 albums that I remember. I don't know if
Yep,
there were more.
there was at least a first one on Forefront that was a self-titled thing, and the second one I don't know who distributed it, but it was called Altered.
there's what I remember about 2020, and I might be wrong about this actually. I want to say they did a cover version of a song that I
They
knew.
did a cover of God Gave
Hold.
Rock and Roll to You.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of a different bands then. I'll have to look up 2020 later. It's been so many years.
No, no,
I
no. I
had
tell a lie. I tell a lie. They did a cover of Hold Your Head Up.
yes, that's
Yeah,
the one I was trying to remember. Yeah.
yeah,
Because I was like, I remember getting that cassette and I was like, wait a minute, I don't think this is by 2020. I think this is a different.
yeah. I forget who originally recorded it now.
I'm trying to remember.
Canned Heat or something.
Yeah, maybe Canned Heat. Yeah, I
That's
can't
probably
remember
not
who it
right.
was.
I'm
That's-
probably sure I'm saying that wrong, but
But
somebody from the 60s or 70s.
okay, so it was the right. It was 2020. Yeah,
It
I
was
thought, and
2020, and it
I
was
want to
Hold Your
say
Head
maybe
Up.
that was their first album, but I can't remember for sure. But cool.
I feel
Yeah.
like it was probably on Altered only because that's the one I listened to a lot. The first
Okay.
album I really
Is
didn't
that
listen to much
okay?
because I didn't like it as much, but I really enjoyed Altered. And I don't have it anymore. I'm not sure
That's
what
probably the
happened.
one I had then.
Yeah,
Was
had a
Altered.
pink album cover with a
Yeah, that sounds
picture of the
right.
band. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Cool. Nice, nice. So, what were your earliest influences in the alternative music scene, and how did you kind of get there? I guess, you know.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a household where, music wasn't a big part of our household. So I was kind of on my own to find stuff. And my parents had an assemblage of records that had kind of come together. And I have no clue how they came by some of the records they had. I spent a lot of time listening to a couple of multi LP collections from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band,
Yeah.
early country rock from Long Island, California. That I still listen to a lot of their stuff, the early days, at least before they kind of became more conventional country in the 80s. And I listened to the Christian radio station in town. So I'd hear, whoever they were playing, Steve Camp and Amy Grant. And that's kind of what I was listening to. But I always liked, more edgy stuff, and then there was a video show that used to play in my town on Saturday nights, hosted by a guy named Tom Green. You might remember it because we're about the same age, called Light Music. It's Christian music videos, Christian scene videos. They played stuff from Michael W. Smith and Amy Grant. And
Yeah.
one week they did a Cornerstone special.
Oh wow.
And they had all these performances from Cornerstone. They had interviews and stuff. And one of the performances they showed was the choir doing Happy Fool. It's Cornerstone 89.
Why as people sing out loud, beware the killer cloud, the air we breathe. Why should we cry along? I know a happy song, so sing with me. Happy for reasons have I, happy for notions have me. I say the sky is as blue as the ocean, you say you know it's some hear the drumming rain.
And that was it. That caught my interest. And I was like, I got to find out what this is because I like the way this sounds. These guys look cool. They sound cool. I like the song. And I started poking around and, figured out who the choir was. Saw them on tour later that year for the first time, touring Wide Eyed Wonder. And, that was kind of my gateway drug. And then I found, the whole Blonde Vinyl Tribe, 77s, the Prayer Chain, I was listening to the Prayer Chain and then kind of followed them through into becoming the bands that grew out of the supernova of that, the end of the Prayer Chain, Starflyer 59. These guys were touring a lot in the 90s when I was in school. And so I got to see all these guys. They don't tour now because they're all old and established and there's not the venues to tour to. Churches don't host groups like that. Clubs, it's not worth their while. And so I think I saw Starflyer when Andrew Larson was still with the band, touring Silver. So they were Jason was still the guy who used to be in Dance House Children.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, when I
Right.
saw this was that guy's new thing called
Yeah.
Starflyer 59 that,
Yeah.
has taken on a whole new currency in the decades since then. But yeah, the choir and their song Wide Eyed Wonder, not Wide Eyed Wonder, Happy Fool.
Hmm.
Happy Fool was my gateway drug into this whole kind of sound. And then over time, I figured out the other groups that built a lot of that sound. So the Smiths and Morrissey,
Hmm.
Jesus and Mary Chain, The Cure, obviously, Depeche Mode. And I listened to all that stuff in college, and that, still do.
Yeah. Cool. So I don't know what you would like to call the Cinder Highway sound. Um, I pulled a term from the Stranger Kings website. Do you know who
Yeah,
that
yeah.
band is? I'm
Oh
sure you
yeah.
do. Yeah. I don't know
Is
how
that
I
part of
think
the
I went down I think I went down a rabbit hole because I was, poring over your lyrics, and it has the lyrics Stranger Kings,
mhm.
right? From a strange place, right? So somehow I went down this this rabbit hole, and I ended up on Stranger King's website, and I think I'd heard of that entity, right?
Mhm.
But I didn't realize the different bands that they'd come out of. I think I've heard a little bit, but I didn't know specifically. But there was a term on there called Cali-Gaze, California shoegaze, I guess it's together. So I borrowed that for your music partly, but
I'll own that. I mean,
yeah,
my stereo mix is, sounds from California and sounds from the UK.
there you go.
That's kind of what I
And that's
listen
kind of what
to.
they were their mixes as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, it's kind of like ambient, dreamy shoegaze, rock. It's it's like a lot of the bands I love, or they're a bunch of different genres kind of pulled together, right? So uh, I'm sure there are a lot of people don't like to be pushed into a one genre, or called something, but it's fun for me to kind of come up with like my own little
Sure. Yeah.
descriptor, right? So
It makes it
what?
hard when people, like, I meet people and they ask, well, what do you guys sound like? It's like,
Yeah,
it's complicated. I mean, just a pretty
yeah.
weird mix of sounds. I mean, there's some angry,
It is. Yours is
funky
pretty
stuff, and there's some
pretty
quiet stuff.
different. Like it has a lot of different mixes into it. That's kind of what I honed in on, the kind of the the dreamy shoegaze ambient type sound. That kind of rides through, and maybe this songs from the Fountain Gate is kind of exemplifies that throughout, I think. But maybe I honed in on this particular album, right? But so how did you end up in gravitating towards what the Cinder Highway sound is, or maybe that's not true. Maybe you didn't gravitate towards it. Maybe it's ever changing, right? But
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of the folks I listen to. It changes over time. It changes between songs, and I don't know if I have kind of a single stylistic reference. The songs kind of just are what they are, and of course they evolve. When I write, stuff doesn't tend to kind of come out as a fully developed song idea that, I write it and then I demo it and then we go in and record it. It's very iterative in that process, as a result of which I don't usually end up with demos at the end of it, because I'm just swapping out tracks on the demos, and I don't usually bother to save them at a midpoint.
mhm.
And they become what they become. The lyrics will change, the melody will change. I know Starlight Again was a song that you had liked. We
Yeah,
talked about that once. That typifies that. I had recorded an instrumental guitar part, really just to kind of test an amp miking technique back when I lived in Hawaii, and had a drum machine for the track and recorded this guitar part. And I liked it. I never could quite figure out what to do with it. It was a hard rock part, but I kept pulling it out every few years. And then when I was recording drums for Fountain Gate, I had some more time with the. I brought my setup out to this cabin he lives in Colorado, and he said, "Hey, you got anything else? Let's do some more." And I said, "Well, look, I got this song. I never have been able to figure out what to do with it." but let's record drums for it and see if we can go from there. So he recorded drums to that guide track. And I took it back, tried to work on it later that month. I just couldn't find anything to do with that part. And so I stripped out all the guitar part, which was the only thing I had given him to work with, and wrote a totally different song with a different vibe and different chords and different words, because it had words, over the drum part he had laid down. And that became Starlight Again.
Wow.
It was like an AC/DC track when that was the vibe of the guide track that the drums were recorded to. It's obviously very different on the record.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, your sound is just ever change. It's evolving, right? Whatever sounds good to you at the time, or what sounds you're going to put in, what instruments you want to put in, different people you might invite, to collaborate.
If there's a common thread to the sound, it's that I'm usually playing the guitars, and I don't strive to put a lot of parts that require a lot of virtuosity in there. It's not my style as a player. It's not my skill as a player. And so that takes the songs in a particular direction. I grew up listening to a lot of country music. That I grew up in the South, so there's a lot of that around. The Dirt Band, even though they were kind of a country rock thing, a lot of country sound there. I hear that in the songs. I don't know if other people do. And then some of the just approach to guitar with the different effects and delays really characterizes a lot of alternative music, and I think characterizes a lot of modern worship stuff as well that I've played at church. So there's a lot of, sometimes I would chase down a sound because I was going to use it at church, and then just keep that because that sounds great. I want to use that on the record. I'll place for that kind of a thing in a song.
Cool. All right, I got one more question before we jump into your album. Okay.
Yeah, right on.
All right, so if you could pick one band that has influenced you the most, what would it be? And do you have a favorite release, or if you could pick one?
Yeah, it would be Kush, which is not really a band.
Oh, cool.
It's a bit like the Cinder Highway.
I was thinking about Kush earlier, just because we were talking about that. What the Cinder Highway is,
Yeah, I guess it's kind of similar. A lot of people hear Kush and think Mike Knott. That's the only thing they can think of, because he was on their first release, which was fantastic.
Those and his vocals are so distinctive,
Yeah. But in my head, just because Kush was the best thing that Knott released doesn't mean it was the best thing that Kush released.
Yeah, sure.
I've loved all their stuff, especially the rock and roll EP, which for various reasons I've pulled out a ton, and it's Prickett's guitars on that thing are just some of my favorite guitar playing ever. And the SP3 album, I don't know if you'd heard that one. That was the most recent EP they did. Is very different from the earlier stuff, but I just love it. It's got great songs and a great vibe. And I don't always, they haven't put that much stuff out, so their catalog is not that deep. But in terms of a group that was an influence on me, it's Kush, and it's because of Andy Prickett's guitar playing. He's just such a great player who just brings so much atmosphere to the stuff he produces and records.
Cool. Yeah, I need to check Kush out more. That's one of those bands I is on my list. I need to go through and listen to more. And I was one of those people who was guilty of hearing that first release with Mike Knott, and I liked it, but I don't know. That was probably in the 90s. When did that come out? Early 2000s, maybe?
I think.
Okay. I remember. Yeah. I don't know what I was doing, probably absorbed in a whole bunch of other music or whatever. And, but
it's a great record. I mean,
it's on my list to go back and check out more of their music. So it's just, there's so much music for me to check out now,
For Kush, my go-to is the rock and roll EP.
Okay.
Because it covers so much territory, and it just got great songs. It's got a bunch of vocalists on it, so the style, changes. The SP3 record is a lot more stylistically coherent throughout.
Mm-hmm.
I I got to meet Andy in recent years at a
Cool.
one of the Prayer Chain concerts, and was talking to him about I was going fanboy on SP3, and he assured me that that was a painful record to produce. I think just the way it went, it was hard to get done, but it's a beautiful record, and it's a very close second in terms of favorite releases. It's not that old to be as influential. I think it came out in maybe 2014 or 15. So it came out right about the time I was starting to get into performing music live.
Mm-hmm.
So I was listening to music in a different way. And then there, of course, the original self-titled album, Kush, New Sounds, is just phenomenal.
Cool. I'll check them out. Yeah, you were talking about Andy Prickett, and I want to say, I was a big Prayer Chain fan, and I want to say there was a band that he was in that I probably have a CD of this buried in boxes. Wasn't he in a band called My Brother's Mother?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that band?
Yeah.
Wasn't that Andy Prickett?
Yep, it was Andy Prickett and Jamie Eichler.
That's
Jamie
right.
Eichler, who did vocals for the Violet Burning for a few years.
That's right.
Andy's been in a ton of bands, and he's done session work and produced a ton more. So his fingerprints are
for sure.
A ton of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Max, he's done a bunch of releases, but The Imposter is really an Andy Prickett record.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I haven't, that's another one on my list to listen to, because I was like, I don't know, but I've heard so many things about it that maybe I need to check it out.
Yeah, the rest of Kevin's stuff, I caught up with a lot of it because I stumbled across his album, The Imposter, and I loved it. Mm-hmm. And that's really the only one. I mean, they're not bad records. They're just not quite my jam, but it's where I started to figure out, okay, the common thread in a lot of this music is Andy Prickett on the guitar and Andy Prickett at the production console. That's why Kush, The Imposter album, My Brother's Mother. That's why a lot of Bloomsday, he produced Bloomsday. So a lot of those bands sound the way they sound because they got Andy's fingerprints on them.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, songs from the Fountain Gate. Beautiful. I've been listening to this a lot while I've been off after my stroke. Mostly been doing repeat listening, to get into it. And I want to jump into some of the tracks. We may hit them all, we may not, but we can talk about anything you want to on the tracks.
Well, first, I can't tell you how much it means that you spent some of that time in recovery spinning that record. It hasn't reached a ton of people, but we've always made the records we've made in the expectation that some number of the copies or the digits would find people who clicked with it, and they're able to find beauty and meaning in it. And so I heard you talking about that on the podcast where you talked about your stroke, and boy, that was really heartwarming to know that those songs got to be with you during some of that recovery time. So
it absolutely did add a lot of beauty in the process of discovering whether I could even, kind of enjoy music, the way I was used to. But so thank you. I'm glad that you were a part of it. And I appreciate you so much. You sent me the press kit. This was probably, I'm guessing it was March or April, maybe. It was quite a while back. I actually get things from people a lot, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna, gonna either. Mostly it's because it's just not gonna fit into post punk, the way what I see as post punk, and I kind of skirt the borders, a little bit. But when I got that, I listened to it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" So I wanted to talk a little bit about, before we get into the tracks, like kind of the album and the theme. Is there a theme to the album in your mind?
There is, although I discovered it, I didn't think it up. I've been working on the songs for a couple years after the earlier releases, and I had a big gaggle of songs, and some I was pretty happy with, and some I just wasn't. And so in January of 2022, over that Christmas and New Year's break, I really just kind of did a sprint on these songs and tried to get some over the finish line, and some just weren't going to get over the finish line right now. I just couldn't find, I couldn't make them work. And so I started throwing them out and saying, you got to wait. There's not a place for you on this record. And then right about that time, I stumbled into a new guitar. I found it, on Craigslist. I got it for a song. I really got it with the view towards just flipping it because it was a really good deal. But the fellow I bought it from was this old guy who'd had it. Guitar meant a lot to him. He just wanted to get it to a place that was going to give it a good home. So I started spending time with it, and I recorded a few tracks with it. And that's the tracks that became the theme from the Fountain Gate 1, 2, and 3. Cool. That was born of me noodling around with that guitar. And I said, okay, well, hang on a minute. I like this. This might be something that we could use. And so I looked at the songs I had and realized there's actually like a coherent theme in these songs about growing old, about starting off, and you're a mixed up punk, right? That most of us were as teenagers. If we could go back and kick ourselves in the rear end, we probably would if we had a time machine. And then you start to figure stuff out, in life, and you find love. Maybe if you're blessed to find love, you might lose love. But you experience some of the ups and downs of life, and then you get to an age where you start to see some of the hard chapters, and you realize, yeah, this person I was friendly with is not my friend. Okay, I went into this thing that I thought was going to be an adventure, and it was scary. You walk to somebody that had a serious medical event, and people that and love. It's no longer grandparents and more distant relatives. They still mean a lot in your life, but when you're young and they're old, it feels different. Then you get older and it's the same, and it hits you different. And some of those songs come out of those kind of places. And so I put them in the order they're in, and that's sort of the story tells. It doesn't tell it very directly. It's snapshots of how I feel about or remember feeling about different things at different times.
Yeah, I think it works cohesively in that way, but it's also, like you said, there's all these different snapshots, of experiences and perspectives and feelings. And it's always interesting to me that the listener perspective versus versus your perspective, as far as what you were either trying to get across, or maybe you were just writing songs about different things, whatever. But the more I listened to it, for me, I really had an interest in this whole idea of the fountain gate, from the Bible, and where it talks about the destruction of Jerusalem, and where Nehemiah was like trying to go through this gate and trying to get to, he couldn't go through, and they were needing to inspect the walls and rebuild Jerusalem. So there's this aspect of like needing to get to the fountain and needing that renewing, that life-giving water, the spring, and all of the destruction, and kind of rebuilding that and leaving things behind. You mentioned leaving things behind in some of the lyrics, and I think there's a lot of things you have to leave behind, let go of, to be renewed and refreshed, and to get to that spring. And I think you have a line in there, and I won't get it exactly right because I don't have it right in front of me. But I think it was a line about something about leaving things behind. You might remember it.
Yeah, it's a song called "Heading East," and it's a line from the bridge that the cleverest thief, the most daring spy, could never steal what you leave behind. Yeah. So there's so many different ways you can interpret that or think about it, right? There's your way probably, and then there's the listener's way. But I don't impose any meaning on a listener,
right. As it should be.
part of my approach to songwriting is if something's starting to feel too channelizing,
Hmm.
I get nervous and I want to back off from it. Partly because my 9 to 5 over the years involves a lot of human tragedy, and I don't
Hmm.
like that coming through in my songs. Partly because it's not my place to tell other people's stories,
Yeah.
and partly because it makes it a little too heavy. So if I see that happening, I try and pull it back and say, what am I trying to write about here? Am I trying
Hmm.
to write about, this person had this thing happen. It was really sad and it was really scary. Or, hey, you're a person on earth and you're going to have things happen that are sad and scary. And a lot of ways you can approach that. What are you going to
Hmm.
do? So that's the thing that is going on in my head when I'm trying to leave room in the songs for what other people can bring to them. Because I think, and a lot of my favorite songs, I remember the first time I met the choir, somebody was wanting to talk to Steve Hindalong about each of his songs. Like, what's that about? What's that about?
Yeah,
And
specifically. Yeah.
right, I don't know.
Yeah.
Look, man, I can tell you what inspired me to write it. That's not necessarily what it's about.
Hmm.
The most recent time I met the choir, separated by almost 30 years, I guess. I got to talk with Derry about the song "Beautiful Girl" that Steve had written, and Derry recorded with Kerosene Halo.
Hmm.
Beautiful song, and Steve wrote it, I think, about his marriage falling apart. That's certainly, if you look at the lyrics at face value, it fits that story, and he's walked that hard journey. But my dad had just died recently before I discovered the song. A very hard goodbye with his medical condition, and that song had really
Hmm.
resonated with me. Why is a song about a beautiful girl resonate about a
Yeah.
relationship of a son and a father in the father's last days? Look, that's not what was on Steve's mind when he wrote it, but it's what I brought to the song when they performed it, and meant a lot to me then. I can perform it now. For a long time, I couldn't do it without just
Yeah.
completely falling into a heap. But I got to work on those for a ways.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot to be said for the ear of the beholder, you know, and that's what I love about the creativity. Not in all music, but also, I think it's evident a lot in the alternative or post-punk type of music. There's a creative element. There's like a poetic element to it, and I think it's
A lot of
cool.
times in alternative rock, you get these little poems that are just, it's not a ballad where the whole song is telling one story. The verse is a
Yeah,
poem,
yeah,
and then the bridge is a different poem. It might not even be
right.
on the same thing.
Yeah,
The chorus, it might not have any relationship to the rest. It's its own, and that's okay. Morrissey does that a lot. I mean, Morrissey songs, who knows where you're going in the next song? They have no
right,
bearing to what he was just singing about. But
right.
why do people connect with that music so much? Because he's given them a little poem, and
Yeah.
each song he's given them 3 or 4 poems.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Before we get into some tracks, let's talk about the what you talked about. I called it uninterrupted musical journey. I think there's at least one track that kind of has I won't call it a hard end, but there's one that kind of doesn't fade in as much maybe. But for the most part,
Mhm.
it's all like a continuous flow. And I'll be honest, like when I first got this CD and was listening and stuff, it was difficult for me I was like trying to get it to where I can hear it without any pauses, right? Through just exactly what you were afraid of, right?
Nope.
But I really loved that you made that choice as we talked about earlier. I'd like to hear you talk some more about that.
Yeah, I just think there's something about that approach to putting an album together that I think can give it a kind of coherence that makes it more than just a sum of the singles on the record. And the choir is made. Of course, not Circle Slide, but the Chase the Kangaroo record is a lot of that.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of Pink Floyd records have aspects of that. And it just helps it be more cohesive as an album, I think.
Yeah.
And then when you do bake some silence in there, it helps it stand out. Now the silence is part of the song design instead of just, okay, one song has ended and another hasn't started yet. The one fading out and the next, fading in with that silence in the middle. That silence is part of the musical experience.
Oh yeah, that's a really good way to put it, because it's like you're listening to it and then you're hearing all these songs that transition into one another, and then you have one that's sort of a ending. It ends not abruptly, but just ends, and you're like, okay, so that's part of, obviously that's part of the rhythm of this whole album. It just, this particular track ends, and then this other one, kind of continues.
Yeah, that was really all there was to it, and I'm not sure what motivated me to do it that way.
Other than what you just said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I mentioned, back in January of 2022, when I kind of did a sprint working on all those songs, that's where I did the unusual. I did save all the demos down at that time. I never end up with demos for the songs because of how I do my workflow, but I had got the songs to where I kind of liked them all, and I kind of wanted to save them at that stage. So I did save them down. I released them to the fan club back in the time. That's how I remember it was in January, because I called the CD January. But when I put them together, several of them, it wasn't even by design. It was just by serendipity. The chord changes favorably would bleed into each other. And so I did it that way for that, and just kept it that way for the final.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's jump in some of the tracks. You cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. You talked about the three. Well, I'll call them instrumentals, although I guess the third one's kind of an instrumental, with some lyrics.
Yeah,
it has vocals on it.
Got Lauren doing the vocals.
Yeah. I think on the first part one, I remember it, as far as part one, I think there was the guitar you talked about. You talked about the guitar you bought, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, it reminds me of what you were talking about, like of Pink Floyd, as far as like, it's kind of, there's a background like synth, probably atmospheric synth over, that's kind of like blanketed, I guess, maybe I'll use that term. Then you have like this, it's almost like guitar plucking almost. I don't know if maybe that's not right, but
Yeah, just a little melody line played on the acoustic guitar. It's really simple. I mean, it's an idiotically straightforward chord progression, but it presents the theme. It's kind of given, different ways in each of the three parts. It's the same music for each of the three parts. It's just performed differently.
And I think it kind of gives that, you called it a silences, like, sort of. It doesn't run ahead of you, I guess. I don't know, with the guitar chords. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Am I making any sense whatsoever?
No, I know what you mean. I mean, it's no kind of way to open a record. You're supposed to start off a record with a fast rocker. That's, your hit single is track one, and it's not supposed to be this very slowly fading in atmospheric thing with a really slow acoustic guitar melody and no words.
Yeah, but it's for that reason, I think it works pretty well. And then you go into Hello, California, Goodbye.
Mhm.
One of the things I loved about this song was it sort of builds like towards the end, towards the, I'll call it a guitar solo, maybe.
Yeah.
And then with this, like these great drums in the background. I don't know who's playing the drums on this,
Yeah,
but
this one has Zach Appleton. So I recorded those with him up in his cabin in Colorado. Zach
so
and
is,
I actually were on a church praise team together
oh,
years earlier when I first started playing. And then we both moved to different places, and then we both found ourselves in the same area code, if not the same zip code, in Colorado. And so
oh, yeah,
I hauled the stuff up to his cabin, and he plays drums on about half the tracks.
cool, cool. Sounds really good.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
This song is sort of like it seems like it's very historical, you know, from your perspective, but it's I think it's probably is it something you just wrote, sort of like there's like this scenario of someone who is a musician. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so I can tell you what was on my mind when I wrote it. We had just left California. We did not end up living there that long because there was a vacancy in my company, and they moved me after a very short time. And half of that time was during the Corona pandemic. So I had all these visions. At last, I'm going to be in California, in the land of my people. I'm going to get to see the shows. I'm going to get to actually get to know some of these folks in person, and actually, maybe I can get to do some of the, get some folks to work with the band. I was looking forward to it being an exciting time, and it just didn't happen. Things worked out that hello, California. Goodbye,
Goodbye.
California.
And then you go right into heading east.
All right. There's nowhere else to go after you leave California.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you were in Hawaii at one point, so you.
Yeah, I guess you could go there, but yeah, we heading east. All about travels and checking my maps, and
Yeah.
that idea of being on the move, and those life changes, I guess, are a recurring theme on the record. But there were recurring changes in a lot of stuff I've written, and a lot of stuff that a lot of people have written, because it's such a timeless theme. We've all lived through that, and I think especially as we get older, that stuff resonates in a different way than it did when we were little. When we were younger.
Mm-hmm. There's the line you were talking about: the cleverest thief,
The
the most daring
thief.
spy.
Yeah.
Yeah. The most daring spy could never steal what you leave behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, great line. Great line.
It's hard to tell who's really on your side. When it's good times, so hard to tell who's reading through their eyes. When it's good times, cleverest thief, most staring spy can never steal what you leave behind. The distance to you, the sun, lost in holy sea. Taking my maps to find out where I be. The distance to the sun, lost in holy sea.
It's funny to listen to these songs, and I keep thinking about the music business, you know, as I'm thinking of these songs. But maybe you'll help me with some thoughts of on the next song. Nothing personal, and you have in parentheses the Axum Sky. Okay, and of course I did a whole nother rabbit trail reading about Axum, and pulling my own little, you know, interpretations and meanings into that. Talk to me about Axum Sky. I think you might have mentioned in one of your posts recently about you know, what is Axum Sky or whatever is all about, or whatever. You know,
Well,
these are
musically,
the mysteries that you.
musically, it's the postlude. So, you know, Nothing Personal is kind of an angry rocker. And then there's this, you know, it sort of falls out and comes back in with that instrumental part with these kind of angelic voices. I thought about just having it be two separate songs, but they're so short. I just made it one song. But yeah, Aksum is, it's the city in Ethiopia. There's a chapel there that the Ethiopian Coptic Orthodox Church, I'm probably saying that wrong, but the Ethiopian Orthodox Church believes that they have the original Ark of the Covenant in a chapel at Aksum. And that idea of the fountain gate, you know, is, like you said, it's not mentioned a lot in scripture, but it always kind of connotes the idea of going through this to being where the Holy Spirit is. And that's what's in the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament tradition, is that's where God's Spirit is. And, you know, people can take that as a, you know, as a religious motif if that has meaning for them. But, you know, I think that even if you don't share my exact theology, a lot of people have, you know, a belief in more spiritual things and how and when we come to reckon with those in our lives. And so while that means one thing to me because of my faith, it can have meaning that's bigger than that. Like, I don't know that there really is the Ark of the Covenant in a chapel at Oxford. I'm not
I
sure.
was floored when I was reading about it. I was floored that that was even a possibility that that's where it's at. I think there
Yeah,
might be some other, maybe one other place maybe where they think it might be or whatever, but
maybe.
supposedly it's there in this church.
But what matters about it is that's their church tradition. They've got a faith
Yeah.
that's really centered on that, and they've so the idea of it has beauty and meaning, even if the exact theology of it isn't something that I necessarily have a firm view on one way or the other. Yeah,
Hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, moving into the
And by
Fountain
the way,
Gate
that was
part.
harder
Oh,
to
go ahead.
explain to my neighbors who are Ethiopian Orthodox.
They're like the basically the uh, original Christians, pretty more or less, like in that area, I believe.
It's one of the oldest
They're
continuously
like,
operating
yeah,
churches. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
The song was named that before we moved here and before I met them, so wasn't inspired by them, but it did. I did have some explaining to do.
They're funny. All right, Fountain Gate Part Two. So I'm wondering, did you use a plug-in? Do you use did you use a Hammond organ, a Rhodes? Did you? I keep hearing like this common organ I would have heard like in a church, in the Hades or maybe the early
Oh yeah,
90s.
just the piano part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tremolo piano, tremolo electric piano. That's
Cool.
I use that a lot. That's one of my favorite
I
keyboard
like it.
sounds.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
and
cool.
that song, I was I'm not much of a pianist. I can't read the notes. I just kind of play by ear, and that was the first song I recorded with that had an actual progression as opposed to just a synth pad. That was me figuring out the song. Like that's actually where
Oh,
the that's not only the final recording, that is the writing process of the song. And that's why it's this kind of like a guy, I guess it sounds like a guy playing a piano at a party. He doesn't necessarily know what he's doing. He might have had a few. So it paints that
yeah.
sonic picture, I guess.
And then there's some conversational chatter in the background toward the end. I was listening to it on earbuds when I was running today, so I could hear it a lot better. But I thought that was really interesting. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, but maybe you're probably not intending to,
Yeah,
for the listener
it's
quite to
obscured
hear
in
it.
the mix, so you're not going to
Yeah,
hear what the people are saying. But it's just a little soundscape as it kind of
yeah,
moves from one part of the record to another. Of going through the desert winds, and all of a sudden you're coming into a party, and then some music starts, and things get quiet, and then you moving on. Party fades.
moving. Yeah,
There's-
it sounds like a party
yeah.
chatter in the background a little bit.
It's a
Some
recording
glasses
of a party.
clinking, maybe.
Yeah, there's glasses
But
clinking, people talking.
yeah,
You know, all
Yeah,
that
I
stuff.
thought it was really cool. Really cool.
It's more of a soundscape than a song.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So one of my favorites, "Good Reasons." I feel like this song has. I don't know if you'll hear this at all, but I really feel like there was kind of a Starfire '59 vibe to this. You know, some of the style of their some
Hmm.
songs, in the bass line and the chord changes, and then towards the end of this song, there's like this little I'll call it an interlude. It reminds me of the choir where there's like this synth like sax sound, so
Oh
kind
yeah,
of,
yeah.
yeah. And you have this line about the fool, you know, who's talking about the stories that turn out like ours never come true, said the fool. And it kind of that kind of makes me think of a line the choir would write, you know. So it's pretty cool that I
I
heard
love
it
that.
like that.
Yeah.
I heard it like that, like with that little synth sax in the background, you know. So I was thinking of Dan
That's actually
Michaels.
a guitar. The
Okay, yeah,
instrument I'm using on that is a guitar, but it's through a lot
cool.
of effects, obviously. Yeah, I think in my head I was channeling like early Pink Floyd, like Piper at the Gates of Dawn era Pink Floyd on that bridge. It's got some
Yeah,
wacky chords but yeah, that's probably the most normal song on the record.
the
Um,
nor-
so
I like
it's
it.
thanks.
All right, pushing forward to what's ahead is the note I put on this on waterfall. I don't know. I'm not sure what else to say about this. I like it a lot. I like the little scenarios. There's is it true there's tanks outside your door and they're burning down the moon?
Waterfall was the last song I finished for the record. On the demos, it doesn't have lyrics because I couldn't think of lyrics. I didn't have a specific inspiration for what's in
Hmm.
there. I just tried to kind of capture that peril of that sense of like, I found my soulmate, and now we're going out in the big wide world, but now there's all this danger.
Hmm.
Now there's all this, all the dumb stuff from 10 years ago, all the traps and snares that lay ahead. There's so many, waterfalls that can suck you over.
Hmm.
And I'm probably giving the most coherent thoughts about it that have ever been thought, including by me. I don't know that I thought about it that much beforehand.
Uh, good. No,
Chris
it's good.
Chris
It's
struggled a
a
little bit with this one as well in the master because it's sonically a little different than the rest of the record. It's actually the oldest recording on the record.
oh,
The oldest track on the record is the guitar part from that song.
hmm,
Yeah, it was recorded before the songs on the Castaway were recorded.
cool, cool. Yeah, you're ready for one of my favorites, Starlight Again.
Yeah.
What's going on? There no more shows.
Oh well, I mean, I recorded it during Corona. That's it. No more shows. And that's actually the name of a Starflyer song too.
Oh, it is. That's right.
They have a
Yeah, I
song
know that
called No
song.
More
Yeah.
Shows. I find myself putting a lot of little homages to the different
Little,
artists
yeah,
that
little Easter eggs
highlight.
in there. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, Heading East has a few. No More Shows is the name of a Starflyer song, and yeah,
Yeah.
it fit.
So in the song Waterfall, you're talking about crawling over the waterfalls, and then in this song, you're talking about the water flowing over you in one of the lines. So
Yeah, well,
in
Mark Hurd has a
Starlight
song
again, you're just letting
somewhere.
it, you're
I
letting the
forget
water flow.
I forget the line from Mark Hurd's song, but it's about how, rain can save your life or destroy your home just depending on your circumstances.
Right, right.
Are you dying of thirst or are you being flooded? Water's very contextual.
Yeah, I love the line. Our days like water flow over you. I want to fill our hearts race, feel the rain on our skin. Starlight fills your eyes again and again and again. Great, great line.
Killing time, it's killing me. I'd rather spend it in your company. Want to feel our hearts race, feel the rain on our skin. Starlight fills your eyes again and again. No more shows, so it goes.
I mean, everybody who's been in love, knows that feeling that like this time is, there's moments when you're really taken by how precious the time you have with your loved ones are. And then there's times you're working, you're playing guitar, you're mowing the lawn, you're doing other stuff. And then, you feel weird about that time, like,
Yeah,
how do I feel about the fact that I was able to go and have this perfectly normal, benign time over here away from this person that means so much to me? Um,
hmm
what do you do with that? I think a lot of the songs on the record explore the idea of the important relationships in our lives and time, and how we don't always spend the time with our loved ones that we want to, and then times come when we can't make the time count enough all of a sudden.
hmm
So I can't find, my experience has been I can't find that balance. All right, maybe it's just me. So I
Oh
write
no,
songs.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you think about the years, like, okay, the past 20 years seems like it flew by really quickly. It's like, wait a minute, I probably have 20 years maybe, if I'm lucky, right?
Mm.
So it's like, wait a minute, it's very sobering, right? And then makes you think about what you said, all the time you spent doing, a lot of these things that were kind of like, it's not like they weren't significant, and you needed some of those times doing things, but it's like, you spent an awful lot of time just, wasting time away, in those, but it's very
It's the same idea
sobering to me.
as Pink Floyd song Time. I mean, I guess in some ways it's the same kinds of ideas that
hmm
we struggle to get that right, and to use our time for the things that are the most important, and to be in the moment when we have those moments.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
said. I wanted to mention for the Fountain Gate Part 3, it sounds like there's Hebrew at the beginning or something like that. It might be English. It seems like I think seems like something that
It's French. Yeah.
French. Okay.
It's a section from it's a passage
Cool.
from Les Miserables.
Cool. Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Talking about time of the troubles during the revolution in Paris.
Oh, nice. Okay, Baghdad in Winter. I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure that we talk about this song. So this one is like Baghdad in Winter. It's like this symphonic art rock jam. It feels like I don't think you even get till about 3 minutes in, I think, when the lyrics start. So I don't know. I
Probably it's
really
just
like
got
this one
one
a lot.
verse in the middle. One verse in the middle of a long.
Yeah.
instrumental
Yeah, and
song.
it's this awesome like wordplay where it like flips dirty sky and dirty day around, right? It has it one way at the on one line and then it flips it around on the next line, right? I think that's pretty cool. I love all that wordplay. But do you have any comments about that song or?
Well, I struggled with finding lyrics for it. When the first version I released that I called the California version as the demo, was just a straight instrumental.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like it wanted lyrics there in the middle, that part in the middle where it kind of comes down. And that whole third part of the record is kind of channeling these themes about coming to terms with things that have just, gone sideways, or the harder realities in life, and, all of the experiences of human suffering associated with war, in every war. Baghdad's, where one war happened, but that song could have been written titled about Ukraine. It could have been titled about Sudan. Could have been titled about North Korea. All these places where violence is used to impose human suffering. That what do you do with that? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. And I think a lot of songwriters don't, and that's just an attempt to try to put words to that. It's more observational. Like, I got no recommendations, just some observations.
Yeah.
Like, I'm seeing this and I'm not liking what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well put. Yeah. All right. Never write your memoirs. This feels like a Smiths or a Morrissey song.
Yeah, I'll own
it's
that.
titled like that. It's kind of has the phraseology within the lyrics of that. When it says, who cares, who cares, who cares anyway? That's very Morrissey like.
One of the things that just bugs me, and maybe this is a song that is a little more personal than some others in some ways. I absolutely detest these guys who go and do some heroic thing, and then they go write a book about it to tell you what a badass they are. 100% of the time, that bugs me, and that's a song about it. Pride and shame.
Pride and shame. Yeah.
That's basically the pages of all those books. If your story's that great, I really think it is better told by someone else. Maybe that's not a very healthy view of the world, but it's mine.
I don't know. I was thinking that pride and shame, maybe that should be like the way you should write a memoir, only from a different perspective. Like, I'm proud of certain things, and I'm ashamed, for a lot of the things too. And kind of you kind of own it all. You're transparent about it, but but I love casually dropping interesting names.
I don't know.
That's so Smith's like. I love it.
I listen to a lot of Morrissey, so I'd probably change some of that.
It's gotta come through, right? It's inevitable, right? All right, I gotta talk about Quiet as Sound, because you've got Chris Taylor on backup vocals, who I love.
Chris is awesome.
And it took me a minute to figure out he was singing, even after. But I can hear it. He's like doing like a higher sort of falsetto type almost. I don't know if I'd call it falsetto, but I was like, there he is. I was like, where's he at? Okay, there he is. I can hear him now. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly if you had a thought in your head on what this song's about. I feel like it's, for me, I'm gonna take it as that God's close to me throughout this song, lyrically, or I can hear him, sort of that still small voice, I guess, that kind of thing. But I'd love to hear you, give your thoughts on it without giving your thoughts on it, I guess.
No, I think that's fair. It's kind of in a couple of parts. It's kind of a conversation back and forth between a couple of voices, and they're sung by the same singer, but there's a couple of characters in this song. And the first is, coming up into, a hard reality, fill in the blank. Everyone has their own that they can bring. If they haven't, they will one of these days. And the second one is like, okay, well, what do you have to look forward to from here? Where can you go from that place you find yourself at? That particular song was inspired by being with a loved one that was, as they passed away in very upsetting circumstances. But other people are going to hear other things in that. But again, it really goes back to, that was just the inspiration for the song. That's not what it's about. If it's about anything, it's about, okay, imagine that all the things in life that we squander our time and resources on are no longer there, and maybe will never be there again. What do you have left? And one of the things that this might be actually where the idea for the song came from. People would come to visit, right, in someone's last illness, but the people who come to visit, like the roster of who shows up, depends entirely on everyone's vacation plans, right? It totally depends on the weather.
Yeah.
The crowd at your funeral will depend on the weather.
Wow.
As one comment. So you really find out, those moments give you a chance in life to really think about what's important. And there was people who showed up, who were very meaningful. And there's people that's like, wow, I didn't see so-and-so there. I guess they had a tea time.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen that There was like a meme that was going around Facebook maybe a couple months, probably a few months ago at least. But have you seen where it's talking about how in 100 years, like you won't, people basically, they're not going to remember you. They're not going to, you're going to be pretty faint, a pretty faint blip on the radar. And the meme said it like very more specifically, but it was very sobering for me to see that go around. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Like you really need to make your mark. You don't have to do something that's this huge thing, but it needs to be something huge that's in your world, and I don't know.
Yeah, when everything else is, not there, what's still going to matter to you?
Yeah.
Um, so kind of a heavy note to end the record on, but
Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
Way to go, Todd. No,
But there's hope, right?
I don't know. I don't know. It's heavy. Yeah, it's heavy, but it's in a way it's optimistic too, I think.
It's
For me.
optimistic if you,
Yeah.
for me, it's
Yeah.
optimistic because I have faith. I have faith in
Yeah.
an afterlife. I have faith in God and my relationship with Him, and so that's a source of hope and strength for me. It's tested at times like that because then you're invited to, to revisit what you really believe about all those matters
Yeah.
at times like that. So I suppose it's a hopeful song or not, depending on how you think about the world.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how Chris got involved in the song?
Yeah, so I'm a huge Chris Taylor fan.
Yeah,
I love Chris's stuff.
me too.
And he's such a nice guy. When I was recording the song, my vision for it was I wanted to actually have a choir at the end, but I knew I couldn't get a choir together or probably have the means to record them. So I was hoping my friends would just record literally like an iPhone recording, and I'd put them all together and make a choir.
Hmm.
And a lot of my friends aren't into the same kind of music, and but Chris turned up. Chris delivered. He sent back like 3 different tracks, these harmony parts and these different
Cool.
parts. It was
Yeah.
gorgeous. It was
Yeah.
way better than what I had in mind. So good that I pulled some of it. He recorded it all for the chorus, but I grabbed some of that stuff from the chorus and pulled it up into one of the earlier bridges because
Mm.
it's such a great part. And it's such a great, I mentioned you bring in other folks to the project and you get that spark of creativity, and that vocal part of Chris's is a perfect example of that. The bass part on Never Write Your Memoirs is another. Juan Villanueva from Hawaii laid that down, and it just makes the song because it's this great part. And same thing with Chris's vocal on Quietest Sound. So yeah, I asked him if he'd be interested, and offered to play some stuff on his records, although he's got more people willing to collaborate with him than the other way around. But he's such a champ and such a lover of the creative process.
Have you been able to hear any little bits and pieces of the creative process of his upcoming record?
Some I don't keep up with him as much as I should because he puts out a lot. Like
That's for sure.
he really keeps his fans engaged,
Yeah.
and I can't quite keep up with it all. Which is a ding on me, not on Chris, because he's
Well,
doing
it's not a ding on you either, but there's just so much out there.
it's a lot.
Um,
But
yeah.
I always
but-
love hearing it, and then I love hearing
yeah.
it because he's not afraid to shake it up. I mean that the Lovers, Thieves, Pretenders record that he did
Oh
with
my
Mr.
gosh.
Simpson, like that
Did you buy a vinyl copy of that one?
I didn't. I got the CD, and I think I got the CD. Well, it's a fabulous record. I absolutely love it.
It's great record.
But it's so different than U.S. Blues or Never Ending Now. Never Ending Now is my favorite Chris Taylor jam.
Yeah. That's good.
But all his stuff is great, and he's willing to take it all kinds of different directions. And he's another guy who is great at giving you a self-contained, like 3 or 4 self-contained poems in each song. One in the verse, one in the chorus, one in the bridge.
Yep.
They're all gold, and the song's not necessarily about one thing all the way through, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, me too. I'm pretty excited about his upcoming record. Just hear him talking about it and hear him play different demos and stuff like that. And I think he had Steve Hindalong on some sort of drum. I can't remember what the drum's even called. He had a little video that Steve got inspired, and he's playing this drum that I think it starts with a U, maybe like that. But yeah.
And I think I saw on Chris's social media, he's got Mitch Connell in the studio.
I don't remember. Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, yeah.
I'm really, because Mitch and Chris have a real chemistry, and I'm a guitar player, and so Mitch's approach to guitar is just fantastic. He really has a knack for adding a spark of magic to Chris's songs.
Yeah, cool. Well, we've got that to look forward to. In the meantime, we've got the Cinder Highway songs from the Fountain Gate, and hopefully we'll be able to get this into the ear canals of more people. So
yeah, it's out there at all the places.
I know how hard it is, you know, to get the music out there, because like you said, there's a lot of different people making music, and everyone has access, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that people can make music, from their own home studio, but I just want to try to get people's stuff out there to more people. So hopefully we can do that. So, and thank you for your patience, because this is the first episode I've done where I've tried to talk I've tried to make it through and speak clearly and not stumble and slur. And,
well, it's been a long session, so you're a champ for hanging in there.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad we had the chance to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Hopefully, I'm sure I'll be talking to you soon, and can't wait to get this out there and share it. So thanks a lot, Todd. Thanks for your time, man.
You bet, brother. Good to see you. We'll see you. I'm looking forward to the episode and catching the rest of the series.
All right. We'll talk music more.
See you, Jim James.
All right. Take care. And that is going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you so much for joining Todd and I's conversation. And definitely, please, 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 as the Smiths would say, let me get what I want, and go and check out the Cinder Highway's music. You'll find all the links you need in the show notes, and they're actually pretty easy to find. So just go search them up. And since this episode is approaching 2 hours, I'm going to get this moving along, and I'm not going to keep you here any longer. I do want to mention once again the music of Palm Ghosts. And if you're in the KC area on September 6th, or in Lawrence, Kansas, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from the KC area, they will be there on September 7th. You St. Louis folks will be visited by the band on September 5th, I believe. So definitely please check them out. I'd also like to mention the music of Asger Tekau, who is a Danish musician. I first heard of Asger when I became familiar with the Danish band Kashmir. And if you haven't gone to check Kashmir out in the early 2000s and the years following, you should definitely go check out their music. I really fell in love with their sound and their music, and I'd love to do an episode at some point on their music. But once Kashmir wound down, Asger moved out into a solo career, and his music is some of the most vulnerable and intimate music that I have heard for a very long time. I was following him just because I knew of his work from Kashmir, and so I was following him on social media, and at one point late last year or maybe early this year, he threw out an invitation for whatever fans wanted to hear the demos of songs from the new album that he's working on. And it was such a privilege to be able to listen to his raw ideas. And I was just struck by how beautifully intimate this album was. It reminds me a lot of the Cinder Highway in the fact that he has a lot of soundscapes with rain and thunder and wind to create an emotional journey. And it hits you right in the heart. And I just can't say enough about his new album that just released. I believe it was August 16th. And so you can go check it out on Bandcamp and Spotify or Apple Music. I'm sure it's anywhere where you go and find the music that you stream. And I just can't recommend enough how beautiful this music is. And I was able to give my feedback and how it made me feel. And he was very kind and gracious. And I was just so touched to be part of the progress of this album. So go and check out Azker Tekau and his new album, Candor. And the album title itself should give you an indication about how intimate and vulnerable a journey this album is. I'll put all the links in the show notes. And with that, I am going to wrap up this episode, and I'm going to end with The Quietest Sound by the Cinder Highway. I'm going to play the full song. I hope I have Todd's permission. I'm pretty sure I do. But I just couldn't think of a better ending to take us out on. And so this is what I want to leave you with. Until next time, peace and love from me to you. Take care.